This guy is a high-skilled alchemist living in a dying small village. He did everything to help the villagers, but they just betrayed him by hiding the potions he gave and selling them to the military at a very high price. He can make a gun and transform it into a machine gun, shotgun, etc. with unlimited bullets. He can also create a high-level shield from scrap, create a high-class healing potion from low material, etc. Before I spoil too much of the fun, let's start the story. It was another typical day in the clinic, in another world, and yet, in a dying village, there were still residents who caused trouble. A lady was angry, expressing her frustration at being disrespected by young people. She kept insisting that the man hand over more medicine due to her aching body after working the whole day in the field. Magna Grace, a 20-year-old alchemist, sat uneasily trying to explain that the woman had already taken a month's worth of potions. The woman explained that she had used up all the medicine and that it was free in the first place. She continued to guilt Magna, reminding him that the ingredients he used came from the village anyway. He clarified that drinking too much potion have its side effects, but Ms. Ilza kept insisting. After some time, Magna handed over another month's worth of healing potions, insisting she follow the right dosage. Angrily, the woman took the box of potions and left. Magna responded with a fed-up expression. Magna was the only alchemist in the village of Rusha, where the average ages of the villagers were elderly. He checked the waiting area for the other patients. The room was filled with elderly people who mostly came by to have a chat with the other patients. Because he was the only young person in the village, he did all sorts of jobs to help the villagers. An old woman asked him if he could fix the roof of her house, which had a hole due to a recent storm. He reasoned that he needed more time to finish his appointments and gather the necessary materials to fix the roof by the weekend. Next, he checked on an old man's arm fracture, telling him that it had already healed and he could stop taking the stimulant potion. The old man explained that he still felt pain and wanted to continue the treatment. Magna agreed, but only let him have a week's dose of stimulant. The old man continued, saying he hadn't fully healed yet and told Magna to do the shopping for him over the weekend. Magna tried to explain his busy schedule to the old man, but the elderly man responded fiercely, comparing his youth to the young people of today. Magna went to gather materials in the forest. A lurking monster caught him sitting off guard while foraging. The monster lunged, but Magna sensed its presence. He pulled out his gun and, with a swift aim, shot the monster in the head. The monster dropped dead before him. It turned out he was the only one who handled the monsters around the village. He noticed that more monsters had been coming by more often lately. He is very busy, spending his weekdays in medical care and weekends managing the villagers' errands. He sat on the couch to rest for a while, having missed the chance to eat lunch. He checked the basket for food, but it was empty after it was probably taken by one of the villagers. Instead, he decided to continue gathering the missing materials to stave off his hunger. He is truly living a tough life. He is paid for his medical services through bartering, so he can't even save any money. Worse, the villagers treat him poorly. They tire him with errands and don't even say a single thank you. While he was walking, the village chief called out to him and asked if he was done for the day. She then handed him a basket of bread. She mentioned that he might even be too busy to bake bread himself. Magna was very thankful for her kind gesture. The village chief recognizes his efforts for the village, so the simple bread was a small token of gratitude. Magna thanked her and went on his way. With newfound hope, he reflected on his situation. He disliked many things in the village, but he was the only person who could provide medicine. Because of this, he believed that without his help, the village would fall apart, so he needed to do his best as long as someone said thank you. The chief stared at him blankly as he left. After some time gathering materials, he fell asleep in the forest. As he was returning to the village late at night, he noticed someone outside. An unfamiliar masked man in a dark cloak spoke to the village chief. The cloaked man checked the potions and praised their consistent quality. The chief enumerated the potions the man needed. With wide eyes, Magna noticed the boxes of potions he had given to the villagers before. The cloaked man offered the chief 3.5 million worth of gold for the potions. The village chief, aware of the ongoing war in the west, insisted that the price was too low and did not give her a fair share. The man apologized and increased the offer to 5 million gold instead. He expressed surprise at the ability to produce high-quality potions in such a short time and praised the alchemist for his talent. The chief smirked, questioning the man's good words for the alchemist. She then proceeded to insult the alchemist's stupidity for accepting such a small favor in exchange for non-stop work for the village. She directly stated how easy he was to manipulate. Magna shivered hearing her words, and emotions overwhelmed him. He ran away into the dark forest back to his clinic. The masked man left the village, still confused about how the village was able to produce such quality potions despite the lack of quality materials. The other man explained that alchemy is the capability of a person to alter the structure of matter using magic. But most life forms and matter resist this magical energy, and spells like alchemy get repelled by it. Only substances with low magical resistance can be used, known as magical ingredients. However, since they are very rare and expensive, the Alchemist Guild holds a monopoly on the market for selling their products. The man wondered if the village had any connections to the association, but the other man brushed it off as long as they could earn money from the trade. The night lingered while Magna sat at his desk, frustrated. He realized realized that the village was profiting by reselling his potions inadvertently. Since he is an independent, unlicensed alchemist, selling his creations on the market is a crime punishable by death. He was unknowingly made an accomplice to this crime. He started wondering whether he should report it, despite the uncertain outcome, or remain silent, but end up continuing to help in the villagers' crime. The thought that the village needed him was the only thing that kept him going. While leaning on the table, his pendant dropped from his neck, and he remembered a memory from his childhood. An old nun had praised him for being a genius at his young age, able to control magic with precision. The nun told him that he should leave the village once he grew up and go to the city. Using his talent, he could even join the Alchemist Guild. The young Magna told her that he would rather help her. His master took the metallic figure from him and turned it into a necklace. She told him that he should value himself more and that his future should not be sacrificed for the sake of the old. The nun placed her hand on his head, telling him how vast the world is and that he would find what he truly wanted to do someday. Magna clasped the hanging pendant and agreed with his master said years ago. He then decided to leave the village once and for all. As he was walking in the forest, he wondered how he would manage once he got to the city, having no connections at all. Suddenly, he heard a scream near the vicinity. A traveling wagon, a merchant, and adventurers were surrounded by goblins ready to attack. The two female adventurers prepared for the goblins' advance. They fought back the attacking goblins with precision. Two goblins fell from their attack. Lucia got worried when she noticed that the monsters were everywhere, surrounding them, unable to make an escape. Liz suggested earlier that they should have left the wagon and run. Lucia held on to the fact that they wouldn't earn gold if they did so. Liz then asked if money was more important than their lives, to which Lucia responded with both. A goblin was about to stab Liz from behind, but Lucia pushed her away just in time. Luckily, Magna shot the monster before Lucia was attacked. Liz asked who he was, but Magna told them to skip introductions for later. More monsters started to advance, and Magna pulled out another gun. Liz realized that using dual pistols wouldn't allow him to reload in time with the surge of monsters. Magna kept firing, gunning down every incoming goblin. Lucia was confused that he kept firing without reloading even once. Only then did the sisters realize that he was using alchemy to shoot his fire. Magna extracted his bullets from the ground and gunpowder from the nitrogen in the air. In this process, alchemy formed the bullets and powder inside the gun, allowing it to reload itself. Because there were no magical materials in the village, Magna had trained himself to turn available basic materials into usable ones. Even with a lack of proper ingredients, he could produce something low cost. His master had even told him that he might be able to make gold from pebbles someday. Magna applied gold transmutation to produce his bullets. The small goblins were dying little by little, so the giant goblin began to advance, aiming for Magna. He continuously fired at the monsters. Lucia told him to run since the bullets were not making a single scratch on the giant. Magna crouched as the goblin raised its huge wooden bat to slam down. The gold transmutation he used didn't require specific materials. The bullets instead mixed with the iron in the monster's blood, causing swords to grow from its body inside out. The sisters were amazed by Magna's feat. He asked the merchant if he was okay, and noticed the sisters were hurt from the battle. He picked some flowers, and using gold transmutation, turned the weeds into a healing potion. The merchant was surprised by what he did. Magna handed the potions to the adventurers and told them he didn't require payment because he was unlicensed. Lucia held his hand in gratitude. She thanked him and appreciated his actions with a bright smile. With gladness, Magna returned her thanks and realized why he had learned alchemy from his teacher in the first place. He wanted to make people smile. He then decided that once he got to the city, he would join the Alchemist Guild to become a proper alchemist and help many people. The merchant praised him and asked if he was heading to the next town. Magna confirmed and explained that he planned to get his license from the Alchemist Guild. Since they were heading to town anyway, they offered to take him there by carriage as thanks for saving their lives. The sisters then engaged in playful banter. Back in the dying village, the villagers were furious when they realized that Magna was gone. All the valuable items in his traveling pack were missing, proving his absence in the village. The chief realized that they had been caught during the trade, which was why he left. The old villagers didn't want to go back to their poor life now that they have experienced a prosperous life. But since there was only one nearby town, she told the villagers to drink the might potion to drag him back to their village. Each villager was given 5 bottles of potion to consume. All of them started to drink their doses, desperate to bring him back as if he owed them his life. The villagers felt newfound, unnatural strength in their bodies, their faces twisted with a maddened look. Finally, the wagon arrived in the foothill town of Kremlin. They stopped at the Alchemist Association's Kremlin branch. The sisters were in awe of how massive the castle-like building was. The merchant explained that the association creates magic potions and magical tools, and is currently holding a special recruitment exam. It is probably because of the ongoing war in the West there is scarcity of manpower in the association. Magna recalled the conversation between the cloaked man and the village chief about the war. The merchant dropped Magna off in front of the association's gate, and the sisters cheered him on for his plan to take the exam. Smiling, Magna appreciated the kindness of Lucia and Liz. He then went to the information center, where he was asked to fill out a form with his his background and details. He was determined to cut ties with the village, once and for all. As he entered the association, he saw that several other examinees were already present. He was amazed by the quality of the alchemy stations they would be using for the exam. It was his first time being surrounded by other alchemists besides his teacher. The other alchemists had their own gear, such as wands and cauldrons, to help boost their alchemy efficiency. Without any formal schooling, he wondered if everyone else came from an alchemy school except from him. With that realization, he started to feel nervous. The time came for the exam to begin. The instructor directed the examinees to check the details of their task inside a wooden box. Magna was astonished to see a heel leaf ingredient and appreciated its quality compared to the materials he used back in the village. But suddenly, the woman beside him questioned the quality of the ingredient. Magna was surprised to hear other alchemists complain about it as well. The instructor clarified that the heel leaf is commonly discarded, but due to the high demand for healing potions during the war, they needed to produce more potions using substandard ingredients. She explained that they were free to use the stations, their personal equipment, and the available materials in the exam hall as part of the test. Many of the other alchemists felt hopeless due to their lack of experience with refining low-quality materials. The instructor told them they were free to leave if the task was too difficult to handle. Some alchemists tried to think of possible solutions, while others left the hall in defeat. Magna couldn't believe how easily they gave up. The heel leaf was far better than the weeds he had used back in the village, and even more so with the provided workstations. He realized he could make a full recovery potion from the ingredient instead of a basic healing potion. He began to wonder if he should go all in. With the thought of proving himself and showing what he could do, he made up his mind he would give it his all. The exam was ongoing when Professor Klaus approached the exam instructor, questioning why they allowed a random person who hadn't graduated from a school to participate. The woman was confused and clarified that it was stated that no formal education was required and that they were just trying to gather as many people as possible. Professor Klaus, furious, explained that no education meant no matter the prestige of the school, it was still essential. The woman quickly apologized and pointed out the examinee with no school background. Just in time, Magna finished making his potion and is ready to show the final product. However, instead of a potion, he handed over an elixir, which surprised the instructor. Magna explained his decision to go all out, citing the high quality of the ingredients and equipment. Professor Klaus analyzed the genuineness of the elixir and confirmed its authenticity. He opened the bottle and proceeded to spill its contents on Magna. Klaus called him a liar, saying it was impossible to produce an elixir using only basic ingredients. The men began dragging Magna out of the hall, but he continued to insist that he had made the potion and that he could redo the process in front of them to prove his work. Professor Klaus disregarded him, seeing him as a disgrace for even being allowed in the building. He told Magna not to show his face again and locked him out of the association. Magna fell to his knees, confused and frustrated by not being believed. He began to question his actions and the events that had just unfolded. Slowly, the feeling of despair crept in, and he started to question his master's words. He felt hopeless, losing his purpose as an alchemist. Without an alchemist license, he felt completely worthless. As he knelt there, Lucia and Liz called out to him. They asked how the exam had gone, confident that he had passed. Sadly, the result was the opposite. The sisters couldn't believe it, wondering if the exam had been that difficult given his skill. He then told them what had actually happened in the exam hall. The adventurers felt bad for him, knowing that his plan didn't work out. Seeing that he was now unemployed, Lucia suddenly had an idea and pulled Magna to his feet. She suggested that he could become an adventurer like them instead. Liz was confused by her sister's suggestion, but Lucia insisted that Magna would be better off with people who could recognize his talent, rather than those who couldn't. Magna started to consider the idea. Liz shifted the conversation, apologizing for her sister being inconsiderate. Magna thought that Lucia might be right. It wasn't about his potions circulating in the market, but about being surrounded by people who actually believed in him. He reached out his hand and asked if they were willing to have him in their party. The sisters asked if he was sure about his decision, knowing that he had initially come to join the association, but Magna was firm. They clarified that being an adventurer meant taking down monsters and retrieving useful items from dungeons. He replied that instead of begging the people in the association, he'd rather join their party. It sounded more fun anyway. The sisters cheered and celebrated his decision, overjoyed to have an alchemist on their team who can heal them. And just like that, Magna began his life as an adventurer. Back at the association, only 2 people passed the test. The examiners noted that most applicants couldn't even channel mana into the ingredient. Realizing the task may have been harder than expected after all, the girl who had been seated beside Magna during the exam approached the instructor. Although she had failed the exam and was asked to leave, she spoke up. She insisted that Magna hadn't cheated at all. She admitted that she herself couldn't believe what she had seen at first, on how precise he had been with his alchemy magic, but she hadn't been able to speak up earlier because of the ongoing chaos in the hall. Professor Klaus still refused to believe her. He argued that an elixir could only be made using high-quality materials and equipment. He was convinced there were no other alternative methods, and believed that Magna must have been a fraud. To prove himself right, Klaus cast a spell on the leftover elixir in the bottle. He dropped in some magical sand and used a time reversion spell to revert the elixir to its original form before it was processed. Everyone in the hall was stunned when the elixir transformed back into the heal leaf from the exam. They stared at the leaf in confusion, searching for the ingredients they assumed were needed to create the elixir. Klaus began to question the accuracy of his analysis magic and even the reliability of the sands of time, the magical sand he had just used. It couldn't be flawed because it had been crafted by none other than Professor Weissman. In his disbelief, Klaus felt his strength leave him and collapsed backward. He began to wonder who exactly was that examinee capable of such a feat. Meanwhile, Magna enjoyed the company of his new friends. Adventurers are individuals who take on quests from civilians or even from the kingdom. They handle all sorts of jobs such as VIP escort missions, monster slaying, dungeon exploration, or even simple house chores. Magna joined Lucia and Liz's guild, Cat's Paw, which is ranked with 1 star. As newbie adventurers, their first task was to harvest fruit at a local orchard. They were overjoyed by how many apples they managed to pick. Because of the bountiful harvest, an orchard farmer generously shared some of the produce with them. At first, Magna was worried he might end up doing shady jobs at the guild. However, his registration at the Adventurers Guild went smoothly. He was asked to add a blood seal to his guild card. The blood was analyzed and used to reveal his stats on the card. It is ideal to update the card once a year, as an adventurer's level is tied directly to their guild level. The receptionist explained that the guild level reflects an adventurer's accomplishments and capabilities. This system helps prevent adventurers from taking on tasks beyond their abilities and protects clients from possible potential losses. 5-star guilds enjoy many privileges and opportunities. On average, gaining just 1 star can take around 10 years. The receptionist then informed Magna that it would take 10 days to process his guild card. Magna returned to Lucia and Liz, who are busy looking for new requests, but having only 1 star made it difficult for them to find decent paying jobs. Liz was worried that Magna had joined their low-ranked guild instead of a higher-ranked one. Magna teased her, asking if she actually wanted him to be part of their guild. While they exchanged playful banter, Lucia suddenly found an amazing request. The two looked over the job description. The promises and rewards seemed too good to be true, and Magna immediately grew suspicious. Lucia, however, was very excited. Magna asked for Liz's opinion. She shared her sister's enthusiasm and insisted they accept the request right away before it gets taken by other adventurers. Magna remained hesitant because the details in the request felt sketchy. Liz reassured him, explaining that all jobs are filtered and approved by the guild before it is released to the adventurers. The receptionist confirmed this, adding that the guild verifies the client's identity and requires advance payment of the reward before posting any request. With that assurance, they decided to take on the task. Being in a countryside village reminded Magna of some unpleasant memories in the dying village. As he looked around, he noticed the village have number of young people. He observed the townsfolk and couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Soon, the villagers called out to them, saying they were invited by the village chief to enjoy some apple pie at his house. The sisters began to banter, debating whether they should accept the offer or not. Eventually, they decided to go, and they called out to Magna to come along to the village chief's house. The chief introduced himself as Zach and explained that due to an abundant harvest, they needed extra helping hands in gathering the produce. Magna wondered why they were offering such generous rewards for such a simple task. Zach responded casually, saying the village had money to spare. Apple pie and apple tea were served at the table, both made from the village's own harvest. Lucia and Liz were excited to enjoy the delicious-looking meal. As the village chief encouraged them to dig in, Magna quietly activated his analyze skill to inspect the composition of the food. At first, the ingredients appeared normal: wheat, flour, butter, salt, apple, rum, and starch. But the last ingredient revealed was wolfsbane. Without hesitation, Magna knocked the teacup from the table, spilling its contents. Lucia and Liz looked at him in shock. He then kicked over the table and shouted at them to ready their weapons, explaining that the pie had been poisoned and could paralyze them. The two adventurers were confused by the sudden outburst. Magna pointed his gun at the village chief, demanding an explanation. The chief's welcoming demeanor vanished instantly. With a sharp command, Zach ordered the villagers to capture the adventurers. Within moments, the door and windows were filled with villagers wielding farming tools as makeshift weapons. Realizing the ambush, the 3 adventurers braced themselves for battle. Villagers flooded the entrance, but Magna quickly summoned several bear traps near the access points, surprising the villagers and stopping their advance. Trapped behind the barricade, only the village chief and his assistant were left inside the house with the adventurers. Magna pointed his gun at Zach once again and demanded to know why they had tried to poison them. He then questioned if their actions were connected to the noticeable absence of children in the village. The villagers' reactions confirmed his suspicions with shock and guilt filled the room. Only then did Lucia and Liz realize they hadn't seen a single child since arriving in the village. Left with no choice, the village chief sighed heavily and confirmed Magna's theory. He proceeded to explain what had happened just a week prior. Their village had been attacked by beasts under the control of a man known as the Beastmaster. The attackers came in overwhelming numbers, killing many and kidnapping all of the children. children, the Beastmaster issued a grim ultimatum. The villagers were to lure in adventurers, alive to be sold at the black market, at a rate of at least one per week. If they failed to meet the quota, the captured children would be fed to the beasts. Magna now understood the situation. The villagers do not mean harm at all. Instead, they were desperate and broken. With no weapons and no hostages to negotiate with, the village was powerless. Ashamed, the village chief bowed his head and told Magna that he alone would accept full punishment for their actions. Magna slowly lowered his gun. He doesn't see it that way. The villagers had already suffered too much. The real enemy was the Beastmaster, the one who forced them into their terrible position. The villagers were stunned by Magna's words. Then, turning to his companions, he asked Liz and Lucia for their permission to help the village. Without hesitation, the sisters agreed. They were more than willing to fight the Beastmaster and rescue the kidnapped children. One by one, the villagers began voicing their concerns. Many feared that fighting back would only make things worse, that resisting the Beastmaster might doom the children, or even the entire village. Already aware of the possibility of such desperate situations, Magna calmly knelt and placed his hand on the floor. He explained that the only way to end this was through an overwhelming force, that is by turning the villagers into an army. He cast his magic, and a powerful transmutation circle spread across the entire floor, pulsing with energy. The spell absorbed everything around them, furniture, tools, weapons, even the house itself, into a massive glowing orb. The village chief stood frozen in shock as his home was torn to pieces little by little and pulled into the swirling sphere. The villagers and the sisters watched in stunned silence, confused and awestruck. When the spell ended, the orb dissipated, and in its place were weapons, armor, and potions which are enough to arm the entire village. Magna explained that with these, everyone now had the means to fight. He handed a sword to the village chief and spoke with resolve, telling him that with these resources, defeating the beasts was no longer impossible. With trembling hands, the chief took the sword and slowly stood supporting himself with it. Then, raising the weapon high, he shouted with conviction. The villagers rallied around him, their fear replaced by determination. The monsters would pay for the suffering they had caused. By evening, the villagers, who are now armored and armed, marched into battle. One by one, they struck down the beasts. Slowly but surely, the tide turned. The monsters fell to their deaths, and hope began to return to the village. The Beastmaster, observing from afar, grew uneasy. He couldn't understand how the villagers had suddenly become armed, knowing that he took most of their weaponries. He wondered where they had hidden their gear. Still, he remained confident because he had a trump card, a massive demonic beast. But when he turned around, his confidence shattered. Magna stood near the fallen creature, its body torn from within, pierced by conjured swords that exploded from its insides. The demonic beast had been defeated single-handedly. Staggered and shaken, the Beastmaster stumbled backward. With a calm yet intimidating tone, Magna ordered him to surrender. Surrounded by angry armed villagers and faced with defeat, the Beastmaster dropped to his knees before the village chief and surrendered. The battle was over. Lucia and Liz rushed over to Magna, cheering and celebrating their victory. The children were freed and joyfully reunited with their families. Magna had faced many challenges, but his very first mission as an adventurer had ended in overwhelming success. The receptionist bowed her head deeply, pleading for forgiveness. Lucia tilted her head in confusion, wondering what was going on. The receptionist explained that she had received a report from the village chief about what had happened, and that the association had unintentionally caused them trouble. Due to the chief's misconduct, the guild would now be initiating inspection protocols to investigate his legal responsibilities. The three adventurers didn't seem bothered and played it off casually. They simply explained that they had done their job and defeated the monsters when they appeared. Hearing this, the receptionist gave them a soft, relieved smile. She accepted their explanation and assured them that she would handle the rest. Now that everything had been settled, Lucia eagerly asked about their reward. Even split 3 ways, the payment would be enough to let them live comfortably for months. The receptionist leaned over and retrieved a bag of coins. She then presented them with an enormous sum of money. The 3 were shocked. It was far more than what had been promised in the quest description. For a moment, they thought it must have been meant for someone else. The receptionist clarified that the Beastmaster they had defeated was in fact one of the most wanted criminals on the continent, a triple-star bounty target known as the 100 Demon Tamer. The bounty for his capture, when added to the reward for the original request, totaled the massive amount now in front of them. Lucia's eyes widened in disbelief, wondering if the reward is really meant for them. The receptionist nodded with a proud smile, then added that because the criminal had been classified as a threat only triple-star guilds were qualified to face, their own guild Cat's Paw would officially be promoted to a triple-star guild. Afterward, they went out to celebrate with a meal. The 3 raised their glasses in a toast, cheering for their promotion to a 3-star guild, and for Magna's successful debut as an adventurer. Despite the celebration, Liz couldn't help but feel guilty. She pointed out that Magna had done most of the work defeating the Beastmaster. But Magna reassured her with a smile, reminding her that she and Lucia had protected the children while he dealt with the monsters. Hearing this, and with both Magna and her sister validating her efforts, Liz finally allowed herself to smile and join in the celebration wholeheartedly. Now that Cat's Paw had officially eventually become a 3-star guild. They were eligible to take on more advanced quests, including dungeon exploration. Lucia's eyes sparkled with excitement. She passionately spoke about dungeons scattered all across the continent, some filled with bountiful treasures that could guarantee a lifetime of wealth. She even mentioned rumors of hidden dungeons, places untouched by other adventurers. Hearing the topic of dungeons, Magna fell quiet for a moment as he recalled a conversation he'd had earlier. While the sisters counted their gains, the receptionist approached Magna and praised how he had helped the village through his alchemy, suggesting his skill bordered on something beyond ordinary magic. Magna admitted he had grown up with scarce resources and learned to make do with whatever was available. The receptionist reminded him that although the guild had been promoted to 3 stars because of his efforts, the sisters themselves were still effectively 1 star in experience, and dungeons could be dangerous for them so early. She sincerely asked Magna to protect the sisters. Recalling that request, Magna proposed they continue taking 1-star jobs for the time being and focus on leveling up. Liz agreed, acknowledging they might do more harm than good if they rushed into higher-tier work. Lucia, however, was confident and argued they could invest their reward money in rare training manuals that teach high-level skills simply by reading them. She suggested buying expensive manuals to accelerate their growth so they could handle 3-star quests and earn even greater rewards. After the two agreed, they decided to visit the market once their meal ended. Outside, the disgraced village chief watched Magna with a menacing look. She and her cronies questioned Magna's worth, given the amount of money he now possessed. One villager suggested seizing him then and there, but the chief turned down that plan. Catching Magna outright would only spark resistance and make him harder to control. Instead, the chief decided to exploit Magna's new friends as leverage to make him comply. The adventurers' market was the bustling business district of the town, where adventurers came to purchase goods and magical equipment. The main streets were lined with famous shops, drawing in crowds of eager buyers. However, the alleyways behind the city hid a darker side, vendors dealing with stolen goods and an adventurers' guild that secretly mediated between underworld clients. Duel fights were common here, creating a far more dangerous atmosphere than the usual market. In one tool shop, the receptionist presented 2 secret techniques: flower dance for twin blades and secret transmission together, priced at 2 million gold. Lucia let out a heavy sigh upon hearing the cost. The sisters grew nervous about spending such a huge amount, but Liz insisted that since they had already come this far, it was an investment in their future. With a firm thud, Lucia placed the bag of gold on the counter. The receptionist accepted the payment and led them to a private room where they could study the skills that would take about an hour to read. With time on his hands, Magna decided to explore the rest of the market. He was fascinated by the many magical tools and potions on display. This was his first time visiting the adventurers' market. While checking the prices, he was surprised to find that a simple recovery potion cost 10,000 gold. The seller vented his frustration about the difficulties in selling such expensive potions. He explained that the Alchemist Association monopolized the release of potions to maintain the said quality control. Magna stared at the potion, deep in thought. He had always admired the Alchemist Association, but now he felt disappointed by what he saw as an unnecessary increase in prices. Back in the secret skill shop, Lucia and Liz had just finished reading the techniques. She was thrilled and eager to enter a dungeon even more to try out her newly acquired skills. Liz, however, reminded her to stay grounded, warning that her overconfidence could lead to trouble. Lucia brushed it off, confidently saying she would be fine as long as Magna was with them. Liz's expression darkened. Her sister's comment didn't sit well with her. The thought that they were earning such large sums of money mainly because of Magna's efforts made her feel uneasy. Noticing Liz's silence, Lucia frowned and bluntly questioned her thoughts. She reminded Liz that without Magna's help, they would have returned to a life of low-paying jobs, barely scraping by, and unable to afford even potions to ensure their survival. Lucia gently lifted her sister's chin and told her not to act spoiled. They didn't have the luxury to choose how they wanted to live. Just then, an old man stumbled and tripped nearby. The sisters quickly rushed over to help him. As they assisted him to his feet, the old man asked if they could help him walk into a dark alley nearby. Once they arrived at the alley, Lucia asked the old man if he needed a doctor. The old man shook his head and pulled out a bottle of potion. He drank it in one gulp, and to the sisters' shock, his body rapidly grew in size, muscles bulging as energy surged through him. They instinctively stepped back, only to realize they were already surrounded. Several other muscular men emerged from the shadows, encircling them. Meanwhile, Magna sat by the market fountain, admiring his latest purchase, a rare fire dragon's claw. The material had cost him 300,000 gold, but with it, he could craft more potent strength potions for his teammates. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to him, one that sent a chill down his spine. He turned and saw the old village chief approaching, speaking as if nothing had happened. The old woman calmly told Magna to return to the village with him. Magna tensed, uncomfortable with the sight of the elderly who had once tried to use him to sell illegal medicines. The chief admitted they had made a mistake by keeping things secret, then casually mentioned she wanted to introduce 2 potential brides to Magna, which completely confused him. The chief clarified that they were young young adventurer sisters. Only then did Magna realize what village chief meant. Lucia and Liz had been captured. Just as he began to react, an old woman urged Magna to talk somewhere more private. Somewhere in the forest, the old villagers gathered around Lucia and Liz, who were tied to a wooden pole. Magna called out to them, and the battered sisters lifted their heads weakly. The village chief insisted that they should all return to the village, but Magna still tried to hold his ground. The other villagers humiliated the sisters to pressure him into changing his mind. The chief once again asked him to return to the village and make potions for them, claiming that agreeing with them was to ensure the safety of the two adventurers. Because of him, the sisters had been dragged into trouble, so he thought it was better to play along for now until it was safe to act independently. He agreed to go back to the village with the villagers. However, Liz firmly refused, shouting her disagreement with how they were treating him. A villager punched her to silence her, which made Lucia worry. Liz reminded her sister of what she had said earlier about not having the choice to live. Relying on others by using Magna, she argued, made them no different from the villagers. Fighting side by side is what made them comrades. Lucia realized her mistake and agreed with her sister. She then told Magna to finish the fight quickly. Magna remembered the Adventurers Guild receptionist telling him to protect them. Determined, he pulled out his guns. Understanding the situation, the chief quickly ordered the villagers to kill one of his companions. Magna pulled the triggers and shot the sisters, which surprised the villagers, who thought it was a stray shot. He then told them to handle the enemies on their side. With newfound strength, the sisters broke through their metal chains. Lucia used her skill blade waltz to slice through the enemies, while Liz used her 100-bloom kick to knock down the other villagers. The village chief was confused, knowing the sisters had just been shot. Magna then explained that he had used the fire dragon's claw to transmute the material into their bodies as might elixir. The chief couldn't believe that Magna had used human bodies as ingredients. He continued to explain that golden transmutation doesn't discriminate between materials. This explanation made the chief smile. She started to laugh menacingly, overjoyed by what Magna was capable of. Her muscles and size grew as she became excited, declaring that she would take him back by all means. She held her cleaver tightly and advanced toward him with her strengthened body. It turned out the village chief was a 2-star, known as the Mountain Princess. The chief slammed her weapon on Magna, even damaging the terrain around them, but she was surprised to see that Magna was able to block her attack single-handedly, even after she had used 10 might elixirs. He explained that he had undergone numerous clinical trials to confirm the safety of his potion, especially because he used non-standard ingredients. He tested its safety, dosage, and side effects on his own body before distributing the potions to the villagers. As a side effect of doing it every day, his unnatural strength remained, while his physical abilities never returned to normal. He had already had enough of how he was treated by the villagers. With a single punch, the village chief was forced to vomit all the elixir she had consumed, and her body reverted to normal. Magna then looked at the other villagers, frightening them as they saw their chief defeated. After leaving the village, he realized that he admired those who helped others in danger for selfless reasons, and despised those who faked kindness for their personal gain. Just like that, Magna defeated every single one of the villagers until no one was left standing. After the fight, he asked the sisters for forgiveness, but they assured him that he had nothing to apologize for. It turned out that Magna had already come up with a different plan, but because Liz had ended up provoking the villagers, he had to quickly make adjustments. This made Liz feel genuinely sorry. Now seeing the two as his equals, he no longer felt hesitation in taking on a 3-star quest. They were happy to be on the same page, and agreed to aim for a higher tier mission. Meanwhile, at the Alchemist Guild, Professor Klaus knocked on the door, informing the person inside that Professor Weissman needed to be briefed on what happened during the recruitment exam incident. Professor Weissman stared at the vial of elixir containing a heal leaf. Professor Klaus explained what had happened during the recruitment exam. Weissman said it is impossible to produce an elixir using such a simple ingredient. Only by extracting every component of the heal leaf could one create an elixir. However, because most materials have magical resistance, the ingredients would lose about 70% of their components during extraction. Extracting all of the components from an out-of-standard material could only mean one thing. Using simple materials such as weeds and pebbles could be used to create potions and weapons. Reconfiguring matter freely is beyond alchemy, and no different from a god who created man from dust. Weissman's concern was that the examinee was able to perform such a feat. He then asked Klaus if the examinee was rejected, to which Klaus agreed and apologized. Instead of expressing any disappointment, Weissman began clapping his hands menacingly, applauding at Klaus's decision. From Weissman's perspective, having someone produce potions from weeds would ruin the market prices of such products, and, as a result, the Alchemist Association would lose its authority. The existence of a godlike alchemist should never be allowed. He then ordered Klaus to contact the dark side to summon the witch. At the Adventurers Guild, other parties and adventurers were talking about Catpaw and how quickly they had risen through the ranks, knowing it usually takes a long time to even reach double-star status. They started gossiping about an alchemist calling him a monster. Although crafting potions are helpful, the cost of gathering materials to make them is usually high, and yet this alchemist was capable of turning anything into something useful. Some adventurers couldn't believe such a feat was possible and thought it was simply hearsay. The Cat's Paw had just returned from their mission. Disappointed they didn't get any treasure from their recent quest, but Liz was simply happy that they could defeat dungeon monsters with the help of the secret manual. Lucia suggested they should buy tools to go further into the dungeon, but Liz countered that they didn't have enough money for that. Having only the three of them in the guild made it difficult to properly divide roles. Lucia suggested hiring someone, but that was impossible due to their lack of funds. Suddenly, Percival, the leader of the 4-star guild Red Hounds, approached Magna. Magna's feats had been noticed even by high-ranking guilds. Percival wanted to welcome him to the Red Hounds, which surprised Lucia. Then a woman suddenly cut into the conversation, drawing their attention. Lilica, of the triple-star guild Black Selena, also invited Magna to join their guild and promised to welcome him warmly. This angered Lucia even more because Magna was being recruited by other guilds right in front of her. The leader of Cat's Paw, Percival and Lilica belittled Lucia and Liz, saying that 1-star ranked adventurers shouldn't hold back a talented adventurer and that they should remain in their 1-star positions. Their statements infuriated the sisters. Magna spoke on their behalf, saying that while he understood that joining a famous guild would give him the opportunity to help more people, he wanted to work with the two who were willing to risk their lives for fights worth less than 1 gold coin. Hearing this, Lucia hugged Magna with joy. Lilica disliked that Magna had chosen them over her. Percival praised Magna for having good companions, but expressed sadness because he had hoped Magna would join a great expedition. Just then, the guild doors suddenly swung open, and Professors Klaus and Weissman arrived, looking for the Cat's Paw Guild. Professor Weissman bowed his head before Magna and apologized for the unfair rejection during the recruitment exam. He took full accountability as the superior responsible for the mistake. Magna expressed that he no longer felt burdened by it. Lucia then brought up the topic of the expedition. Weissman invited the Cat's Paw to take part in the 38th Grand Exploration scheduled for the upcoming week. He then ordered Klaus to discuss the details. The Grand Exploration is organized by the Alchemist Association and involves large-scale excavation in a deep, unexplored dungeon. The goal is to reach the deepest levels, nearly 80 meters down, in uncharted territory. 1-star guilds are recruited under the Red Hounds as subcontractors. Around 200 adventurers, workers, and association members are involved in the operation. Tasks are divided among securing routes, setting up camps, transporting supplies, guarding association staff, and excavating resources. Cat's Paw is tasked with scouting the unexplored 100-meter depth of the dungeon. These uncharted areas most likely contain ether veins or ancient artifacts. Acquiring such resources could greatly aid human advancement. Lucia, after hearing Klaus's explanation, was confused about what rewards they would receive. Weissman clarified that the association would provide personnel and supplies, while Cat's Paw's main task would be treasure hunting. In return, they would be generously compensated. Lucia pulled the two aside to discuss the offer with her companions. They saw it as a great deal, especially since supplies would be provided, and other people would handle tasks that the three of them couldn't manage alone. Liz worried that it might be too good to be true, but Magna thought that as a reputable association, they wouldn't present a fake request. The team decided to accept the quest. Weissman told them to proceed with the contract signing immediately. Percival and Lilica would be joining them on the day of the mission. A week later, at the outskirts of Kremlin, near the Virgil ruins, over 200 members of the exploration team descended into the dungeon. They took the shortest route through the Labyrinth City, heading towards Deet City. Once there, 1-star adventurers were in charge of transporting supplies from the surface to the camp. 3-star rank and above were tasked with the main operation of exploration. As they reached the great subterranean forest, the team faced a winged serpent. The deeper they descended into the dungeon, the more monsters they had to fend off along the way. After 10 days, they reached the dragon's graveyard. They crossed a bridge made from the spine of a gargantuan dragon. Percival assured them that dragon bones are stronger compared to stone bridges. Millions of years ago, huge dragons roamed when this layer was still the surface back then. Finally, they arrived on the other side of the bridge. Lilica was glad to see that the glow moss they had brought back from the last expedition had spread well, improving visibility as they descended. They decided to set up the base camp in the area, with Percival ordering the other adventurers to build a wall while some kept watch. As for the advanced team, they would venture through the cave beyond the dragon's jaw after resting. Their goal was to reach the Great Abyssal Falls, the deepest point humanity had ever reached. Beyond that lay unexplored territory, so they had to be prepared. The sisters took a closer look at the dragon's jaw, while Professors Weissman and Klaus observed from a distance. Weissman asked Klaus about the witch. During that, witch had faced multiple monsters simultaneously, but with a simple raise of her hand, they were eradicated. Klaus responded that the witch had already reached the Great Falls. Soon after, the advanced team went further into the dungeon. Later on, they faced armored lizards with scales harder than steel. The team prepared for battle as the monsters advanced. Percival rushed toward the enemies with his power charge, while Lilica sliced through an armored lizard using her skill. Calamity Edge. Magna shot the monster multiple times, but even after swords grew from its insides, it remained standing. So instead, he used his physical strength to crush its head into the ground. Both Percival and Lilica were amazed by the display of his strength. While they were busy watching Magna fight, the sisters called out to them, asking for help. Percival reminded Liz that the manual she read included a skill that ignores enemy defenses. Remembering this, Liz dodged the enemy's attack and focused on her aura. Using Violet Lightning Palm, her enemy was defeated. On the other side, Lilica noticed that Lucia was holding back. Lilica instructed her to slice through the monster's body. Overwhelmed, Lucia went all in to attack the armored lizard. Her first strike barely dug into its armor. Concentrating her aura as her blades crossed, she was able to finally slice through its head using Gavotte Cross. Lucia was happy to have defeated the monster. Percival commended their choice of buying the manual's Beauty in Nature and Twin Blade Dance. Those are top-tier skills, but very expensive. Lilica took back her words from when she saw them as lowly when they first met, and then praised the sisters for being good adventurers. The sisters were really happy to be trusted by their high-ranked companions. Truly, the technique manuals are great early investments. Currently, they are already 900 meters deep in the dungeon, and they would soon reach the magnificent view of the great abyssal falls just ahead. Back in the Kremlin, Adventurers Assembly Hall, the receptionists were receiving calls with requests about a magic tool. One of her co-workers commented on how smoothly things were going in the expedition. With a large portion of their forces committed to the operation, having a smooth flow in the system was necessary. Suddenly, an adventurer arrived. Mr. Tosh, a swordsman with a scarred face, had just delivered the new guild member cards, which made the receptionist really excited. She then told him about a major rookie on their first job. Mr. Tosh brought up a rumor from the port. He had ridden a ship from the Milverna headquarters to Kremlin. However, the ship before his had been attacked by a kraken, a 4-star threat magical beast. Miraculously, the ship made it safely to the port. People said a witch had incinerated the kraken using fire magic. She couldn't believe that someone could burn a fire-resistant beast to ash. Finally, the advance team arrived at the Great Abyssal Falls. Magna noticed how the temperature suddenly rose. With only 7 known 5-star wanted criminals in the world, it was possible that the witch, Crimson Calamity, was in the same place as them. Suddenly, a barrage of attacks came from above. Having no experience with others who possessed killing intent, Magna didn't notice the assault right away. But Percival was the first to react, using his skill Ace Guard to protect the advance team. Sadly, his shield tore, and he was burned by a wave of scorching heat. Lilica was able to escape in time, using Percival's sacrifice as an opening. With her Godspeed skill, she slashed through the witch's neck, but to no avail. Her blade sliced through empty air, allowing the witch to counter. With a single hit, Lilica was defeated. Liz, Magna, and Lucia were left in shock, witnessing their comrades fall before their eyes. Within 3 seconds of encountering the Crimson Calamity, it had all happened. Finally, the witch and Magna came face to face. Because of his hesitation, Percival and Lilica had already received an overwhelming attack. Magna started shooting at the witch, but his bullets simply passed through her body. The witch asked if he was Magna. Both Lucia and Magna were surprised that she knew his name. He denied it, but the witch saw right through him. Her teacher had told her that Magna was a very bad person because his alchemy caused trouble. By defeating him, she believed she could please her teacher and make herself more relied upon. With a menacing expression, she expressed how much it meant to her to be needed, believing that if she wasn't, then she didn't deserve to exist. She cast her divine magic, Prometheus, with terrifying power. Magna, though confused, managed to grasp the general meaning of her words. He handed the sisters some elixirs to take care of, while he kept the witch busy. But his bullets continued to pass harmlessly through her. The witch struck with a powerful punch, which Magna narrowly dodged. He retaliated by summoning spikes from the ground, but once again, they passed straight through his enemy. While dodging and observing her attacks, Magna began to understand what was happening. Because of the intense heat surrounding her, the witch's image was not real. With her magic active, no physical attack could land. Realizing this, he decided to shift his focus entirely to evasion rather than offense. Keeping a strong spell active consistently drains a lot of mana, as shown clearly in the status analysis. If she held on for just 3 more minutes, then escape and launch a counterattack, the tides could turn. The witch smiled menacingly. Suddenly, Magna fell to his knees. The witch explained that her spell consumed not only mana, but also a significant amount of oxygen. She raised her hand and cast an overwhelming attack. In response, Magna used his alchemy to create a thick wall, attempting to block the intense heat ray. Knowing that it wouldn't be enough to protect himself, he quickly reconsidered the wall's structure, thinking of how a sparrow's feathers trap air to stay warm during winter. He then reformed the wall into a honeycomb-shaped structure, designed to insulate a layer of air and resist the heat more effectively. But within moments, the witch cast another spell directly at him. The scene was consumed by a blinding light, Magna's image swallowed in the radiance. When the light faded, Magna was nowhere to be found. A massive hole had been blasted through the wall. The Crimson Calamity looked on, satisfied with her attack, convinced her magic was finally useful to her teacher. Realizing what had just happened, the sisters collapsed to their knees in despair. But suddenly the witch was shot. As the dust cleared, Magna was revealed. alive and holding his dual guns. Seeing him brought immense joy to the sisters. The witch couldn't understand how he was still alive after her devastating spell. Magna's barrier hadn't just been a shield against the flames. It was created from the ground itself, designed to dig a hole for him to hide in. Frustrated, the witch fell to the ground, realizing she had let her guard down. Meanwhile, the sisters quickly approached Magna, relieved to see him unharmed. After some time, Magna was able to help Percival and Lilica heal and get back on their feet. The witch known as Crimson Calamity was Melt, who had single-handedly cast a divine spell that usually required 10 people to chant. She was the only one among the 7 criminals with a quadruple star bounty, a 5-star wanted criminal. They began to wonder why she was after Magna's life. Liz recalled the witch mentioning someone, her teacher. The only person Magna knew who might hold a grudge against him was the village elder, but it seemed impossible since the chief had no known connection to the witch. Suddenly, Professor Weissman and Klaus arrived at the scene. Weissman commented on how Melt had failed him and expressed his high expectations for her. Melt was on the verge of tears when he mentioned his disappointment. Melt screamed emotionally in pain upon hearing such harsh words from her teacher. Percival and Lilica asked Weissman for an explanation and whether he had been the one to order the Crimson Witch to hunt Magna. He casually confirmed their suspicions, stating that a threat like Magna to the association must be eliminated. He then admitted that he had overestimated Magna. His alchemy skills were merely a common transmutation with abnormal efficiency and precision, but beyond that, he couldn't create new things out of nothing, which meant he was far from being a god. Still, having such capabilities made him a threat to the association, which led to the decision to eliminate him. Lilica angrily expressed her disagreement with Weissman's thoughts and quickly leapt forward, throwing her blades to the ground. Her sudden action caught Weissman off guard. Lilica then gave Magna a signal. Magna raised his gun toward the professor in response to the malice aimed at him. The bullet struck Weissman in the head, causing him to collapse. Lucia rejoiced at Weissman's defeat. Instead of his body dropping to the floor, Weissman stood up, his head regenerating before their eyes. For him, alchemy was a study that led to godhood. He reintroduced himself as Victor Weissman, the alchemist who had mastered biological transmutation. Now, after his recovery, he wore a younger face. Using his right arm, he transformed it into something else, a scorpion's tail. Magna was shocked to witness someone capable of rewriting the blueprint of living beings. Weissman launched an attack, but Percival quickly cast his skill to protect the team. However, the scorpion tail passed harmlessly above them. It was aiming for the dying Melt behind them. They couldn't believe why he would attack his own ally. Weissman only saw her usefulness and cast Neuron Invade. With her mind controlled, Melt spoke the spell Apocalypse. Magna quickly understood that the attack would spread in all directions, so he instructed everyone to jump down. He quickly grabbed Melt's arm just before her magic exploded. The team made a desperate run for safety and jumped into the abyss. The advanced team began falling into the depths. Amid the ongoing chaos, Lilica and Liz were relieved to have made a quick move, avoiding the blast from above. But Lucia was more worried about the height they were falling from. It would surely mean their death. She looked up, asking Magna what they should do next. She was surprised that he had taken Melt with them. Knowing that leaving her behind would result in her demise, Magna took Melt with them. As they continued to fall, Liz and Lilica noticed how the waterfalls turned into mist due to the vast height. Percival checked their distance and realized they had already fallen over 1,000 meters from the abyssal falls, but the bottom was still not visible. Magna thought of a plan, but he would need help from Melt. He clarified that her allies had already abandoned her, which is enough reason for her to stop targeting him. To ensure their survival, he asked her to cast the magic she had used before directing her magic at the bottom of the pit in exchange for his last full recovery potion. His team was worried, uneasy about making a deal with someone who had tried to kill Magna earlier, but Melt realized he was asking for her help, implying she was needed. Magna told her she was the only one he could rely on. Melt smiled, overjoyed, and agreed. She took the potion and once again cast her divine magic. With intense power, Melt directed her beam downward. All the water from the waterfalls had accumulated into a huge pool below. If exposed to such intense heat, a massive steam would rise. As the steam began to rise, Magna instructed Percival to use his shield to create an updraft, which Percival quickly complied. With his huge barrier colliding with the steam, the team's fall slowed, allowing them to regain their footing. Now, using the shield as a lift, Magna instructed everyone to jump into a side tunnel in the wall. The team moved quickly, escaping just before the barrier shattered into pieces. They all took a breather after the intense situation. Magna then checked if everyone was all right. Percival once again measured their distance. They were currently 4,360 meters below, making it nearly impossible to climb all the way back to the surface. Meanwhile, Melt sat quietly to the side. The team was worried about having a wanted criminal with them. Melt understood she was in their way, even after everything she had done to help. But she didn't mind. She knew she would be gone soon anyway. Her words confused the advance team. Then, suddenly, she dropped herself into the abyss. Surprised, they quickly caught her in time. Melt was shocked that she was once again saved by Magna. Feeling like a burden, she thought it was better to disappear. Magna reprimanded her gently, telling her she should take better care of herself. She was surprised that he actually cared. Magna faced his comrades, insisting that in their situation it was better to have more fighters to handle possible threats. They needed to cooperate until they reached the surface. Percival agreed with him, which surprised Lilica. He clarified that there was no guarantee they would find a way back to the surface, but using Melt's magic, they could drill down to the bedrock. One by one, the team agreed to work with her as long as she didn't betray them. Melt stood up and happily introduced herself, thanking Magna for asking for her help. She casually told him that if she was a burden, he could just tell her to disappear. Magna was surprised by how lightly she said those words. Percival started planning, suggesting they take a meal break and refresh their night vision potions. Because of the lack of space, Lilica suggested moving further into the cave to eat. As Magna took a step forward, he noticed existing floor pavements on the ground, artificial structures, even at such depths. Lucia was excited at the prospect of exploring an undiscovered dungeon. Professor Klaus and Weissman, now back to his former image, remained on the upper level. The platform they once stood on was now destroyed, a testament to the power of a level 80 spell cast by the Crimson Calamity. If Magna died from the fall, then the authority of the Alchemist Association would remain unchallenged. Even if they had jumped before the explosion, the abyssal falls at least 3,000 meters deep would surely have killed him. Klaus, however, was growing anxious. If the advance team failed to return to camp, suspicion would inevitably fall on them. Fortunately, Professor Weissman already had a story prepared. He would claim that, out of curiosity, he and Klaus had followed the advance team. Faced with overwhelming monsters, the team had fought valiantly to protect the clients, ultimately sacrificing their lives in the process. The demise of the Cat's Paw Guild was unquestionable, but the other guilds wouldn't simply believe that their leader died based on their word alone. Weissman, ever cold and calculated, stated that they simply needed to bring back a part of a body as a memento. Klaus was confused after all. The advance team's bodies were at the bottom of the cliff. With a grim expression, Weissman activated his biological alteration. Without hesitation, he stabbed Klaus and forced his body to change. Klaus screamed, writhing in pain as the forced mutation reshaped him. As he collapsed to his knees, his form shifted. Skin, muscle, and bone twisted until he had fully taken the form of an injured Percival. Weissman calmly declared that all they needed was to bring back the leader's head. That way, no one would be able to tell the difference. Back in the Kremlin Assembly Hall, everything had fallen into chaos. No updates had arrived from the advance party, and even the clients were now missing. In the midst of the confusion, Tosh sensed that something was wrong. He then noticed the receptionist standing silently, deep in thought. She seemed to be calculating something in her mind. After a moment, she asked Mr. Tosh the typical strength of a 5-star guild leader. He responded that it is usually around level 70. She had long suspected that Magna was no ordinary alchemist. There was a quiet hope in her that he might not just be a 4-star adventurer, but someone whose strength matched even the highest-ranked adventurers. Her eyes scanned his profile. Magna was still listed as level 7. His occupation was labeled simply incomprehensible. A strange chill ran down her spine as she stared at the ID. The uncertainty only deepened. She began to wonder just who Magna truly was. Meanwhile, the advance team reached a dead end in the cave. Lilica observed that there was an open space beyond the cave-in. She requested Melt to clear the blocked passage with her magic. Unfortunately, Melt's magic power had been depleted after casting her last spell. Lilica mocked her for her inefficiency, prompting Melt to apologize and question whether it would be better for her to disappear if she was useless. Magna quickly rejected that notion. He used his skill to produce 30 bottles of high-grade magic potions, astonishing Percival. Magna instructed Melt to drink 3 vials to restore her magic, and gave her additional potions for future use. Once her magic had recovered, Melt successfully blew open the passage, happy to be useful once again. Percival then commented that, while he wasn't familiar with alchemists, he knew that recovery items typically required an ether ore, a rare and expensive material, as a base. Realizing that Magna had used such ingredients for their sake, he insisted that the Red Hound would repay him. Magna, however, shrugged off the offer, explaining that they couldn't afford such costly materials. He went on to explain that ether ore is formed when the magic power in the atmosphere crystallizes. Magic naturally exists in the air and helps people recover their mana simply by breathing. Using alchemy, Magna was able to compress atmospheric magic into a more efficient form, allowing him to create potions at a cost of less than 1 gold coin. According to Percival's knowledge, expensive materials are normally used in potion making, but their group couldn't afford that luxury. Magna shared his surprise at how overpriced potions were, and criticized the inefficiency of most alchemists, who rely only on quality materials. He believed that the Alchemist Association was more focused on profit than proper training. Now that they had tried to kill him, he planned to return the favor once they got back to the surface. Deep in thought, Percival didn't believe it was that simple. Magic power was equivalent to military strength, and the amount of magic used in war represented national power. Ether ore was considered more of of a strategic resource than of a gunpowder. If someone could produce recovery potions or even magic power itself without limitations, it would overturn the very foundations of the world. Percival realized that if such a truth came to light, the entire world would fight to claim Magna for themselves. At last, the group emerged on the other side of the cave and found themselves standing before ancient ruins, remnants not of a lost age, but of a modern world. The advance team stood before an unfamiliar structure. Even at a depth of 3,000 meters, it was surprising to find man-made structures in such a place. Lilica wondered if humans had existed even before the Age of Dragons. Suddenly, Liz felt weak and dropped to her knees, breathing heavily. Worried, Lucia approached her sister, wondering if she was exhausted. Holding Liz close, she requested a short rest. Magna volunteered to check the surroundings for safety. Percival agreed and decided to stay with the sisters. Lilica also offered to join Magna and asked Melt to remain at their current location. As they explored the area, Lilica noticed the ruins were in pristine condition even after what seemed like billions of years. Magna believed it was possibly because the cavern had once been an ether ore deposit. He had heard that ether ore possessed preservative properties far greater than those of amber, powerful enough to preserve creatures without decay. It was possible that the ether ore had vaporized, perfectly preserving the ruins. Lilica also remembered rumors of an ancient person being revived after being trapped in ether ore. Magna thought that was more of a tall tale. Amazed by the ruins before them, they felt their discovery must be shared with their friends above. They also agreed they should bring back a souvenir. Magna nodded and decided to look for odd mementos while continuing to check for danger. If the place was truly an ether ore deposit, then the high concentration of magical energy might attract powerful monsters. Magna warned Lilica not to stray too far. Now sitting on a tank unknown to him, Magna observed the area. All of the structures were foreign, and many of the items' purposes were unclear. However, there were a few things he could recognize. A large cylindrical tube resembled a cannon similar to the ones that existed in their era, though the ones in these ruins appeared far more evolved. The ammunition, too, was nothing like traditional flintlocks. Upon examining the inside, he found it contained integrated gunpowder. The concepts and manufacturing methods were far more advanced, and yet everything was scattered around carelessly. He began to wonder if this civilization had been at war. Suddenly, Lilica called out to Magna from atop one of the buildings. When he reached her location, she pointed towards something on the horizon. There stood a towering structure, one impossible to recreate in their era. Magna and Lilica couldn't believe how incredibly high it rose, almost reaching the cavern's ceiling. He speculated whether they could climb it and use Melt's magic to blast through the floor above. As they stared at the tower, something emerged from its peak. At first, the figures looked like birds flying out of the structure, but as they came closer, their true forms were revealed. Demons. A dark angel, Baphomets, and gargoyle lords of unknown strength level rushed toward them. These beings were unlike anything Magna and Lilica had ever seen, only known to them through ancient texts and myth. As Lilica attempted to flee, the dark angel teleported in front of her. The creature slashed at her, sending her flying. Magna quickly shot at the winged being, but his bullets failed to leave even a scratch. Just before the dark angel could stab Lilica with its sword, Magna charged, delivering a powerful kick. But the creature blocked the blow effortlessly with its sword. Lilica, injured, urged him to leave her behind and escape, but Magna couldn't bring himself to do that. Besides, they were already surrounded in all directions. The other winged creatures watched silently, observing the battle between the adventurers and the dark angel. His flintlock was useless against such high-ranking enemies. As he braced himself, he remembered the evolved weaponry of the ancient civilization. He wondered if he could somehow recreate it. Pushing away his doubts, he raised his weapons and activated his magic, golden alchemy. In an instant, his flintlocks transformed into shotguns. Structure does not lie. Knowing both the structure and function of an object, there is nothing that can't be reproduced. Magna aimed at the attacking demons and started shooting. He twisted his shotguns to reload and continued firing at the monsters. Lilica, though amazed by the transmutation, understood the gravity of the situation. The number of their opponents was too overwhelming for Magna to handle alone. The shotgun's frame was held together by two core concepts. The first was firing a large lead shot with an immense charge of gunpowder, while the second used that same powerful charge to launch tiny pebbles, buckshot. Using his new weapon, Magna fired at multiple monsters with a single shot. As the attacking gargoyles were defeated, the Dark Angel ordered the Baphomets to cast a dark spell. Lilica, watching from a distance, noticed the Baphomets focusing their power. However, the shotguns were not suited for long-range combat. Once again, Magna altered the structure of his weapon, this time into something faster, farther-reaching, and more piercing than magic. Through his golden transmutation, the shotguns transformed into a heavy machine gun. He resumed firing, bullets tearing through the demons, reaching even those flying far above the battlefield. In Lilica's knowledge, guns were inconvenient weapons. They are slow to reload and poorly accurate compared to magic, which was stronger and more reliable at long distances. But the weapon Magna wielded was unlike any she had seen. With a single squeeze of the trigger, it fired multiple rounds, continuously non-stop tearing through through distant enemies. This weapon redefined lethality. Killing became faster, farther, and deadlier. A perfected creation, the Steel Thunder. Terrified for their lives, the remaining demons fled in haste, leaving the adventurers behind. Magna noticed his hands still felt numb, even with his strength enhanced. Only then did he realize perhaps the weapon wasn't meant to be used that way. Magna quickly approached Lilica and handed her a recovery potion, which she gratefully accepted. He then reminded her that they needed to return to their team, or else their absence would cause unnecessary worry. After some time, they arrived at the advance team's location. As Magna began explaining how they had survived, he was surprised by the scene before him. Melt sat atop a pile of incinerated monsters, happily welcoming Magna and Lilica back. It turned out that Melt had protected the team from a swarm of monsters. Thanks to the large number of mana potions Magna had given her earlier, she had been able to fight continuously. Pleased to have been useful, she smiled proudly. Magna reached out to take Melt's hand to thank her, but she misunderstood the gesture, thinking he was proposing marriage. While Melt was overjoyed, Percival remained cautious, fully aware of how dangerous the area still was. Magna informed him of a tall tower nearby that could be connected to the upper level. The structure was likely crawling with monsters, but he suggested they push forward immediately. Percival, however, expressed concern, disagreeing with the idea of sacrificing safety for progress. Anticipating this, Magna handed him a more advanced shield to replace the one he had lost. The shield had been transmuted from the armor plating of a cannon recovered from the ruins. Given the new weapon and his renewed role, Percival accepted the responsibility. Lucia then helped her sister, telling her it was time for them to leave. Magna reassured them both that he would bring them back to the surface. Hearing such kind words, Liz felt a sense of encouragement. Percival examined his new shield. Even with a strong metal like mithril, he had never seen a shield so light and refined. He began to wonder if it had been transmuted from an unknown material. Lilica, too, expressed amazement at Magna's abilities, astonished that he could even transmute ancient relics. She feared that if such knowledge were to spread to the surface, it would cause a major uproar. Despite their thoughts, Percival believed Magna was a reliable ally. For now, their focus had to remain on surviving and escaping together. 5 days after the disappearance of the advance team, the camp at Dragon's Grave was filled with murmurs. Rumors spread about a party that had rescued a professor from the Alchemist Association, who had been hiding from the monsters near the Great Abyssal Falls. Many found it hard to believe that the entire advance team had been wiped out. Professor Weissman sat quietly, listening to the chatter around the camp. The Red Hounds stood in silence, staring at their leader's severed head, unable to accept that he was truly gone. Weissman asked for their forgiveness, explaining that Professor Klaus had insisted on accompanying the advance team, unable to restrain his curiosity. An adventurer suddenly stepped forward, asking about her sister. Weissman expressed his sorrow, explaining that he had wished to bring everyone's remains back, but as a frail old man, he could only carry one body. Lilica's companions broke down in tears upon hearing of their leader's death. Weissman accepted full responsibility, blaming himself for failing to restrain Klaus and his reckless curiosity. To prevent further casualties, and as the official client of the Adventurers Guild, Weissman announced the suspension of the 38th Grand Exploration. As compensation for the loss, each adventurer would receive 2 million gold, while the affiliated guilds of those who had died would receive an additional 200 million gold. He made this declaration on behalf of the Alchemist Association. The representative of the guilds politely accepted the offer and the sincerity of the association, knowing there was little else that could be done. The Black Lilies had hoped to recover their leader's remains, but they understood they could not manage it alone. Weissman bowed his head in gratitude for their understanding. With his face hidden from the crowd, he smiled, satisfied that the price of alchemical goods would remain stable. The market would recover, and their pursuit of knowledge would continue unhindered. He was overjoyed. Suddenly, a voice called out, telling them not to be deceived by a fake corpse. The crowd looked up in shock. The Cat's Paw, along with the leaders of the Red Hounds and the Black Lilies, stood before the gathering. A wave of relief and joy swept through the camp as everyone saw them alive and safe. Everyone except for Weissman. He stared in disbelief, unable to accept that they had returned. Magna stepped forward and calmly stated that they had walked all the way back from 4,260 meters deep. Lilica followed, revealing the truth. It wasn't monsters that tried to kill them, it was Weissman, acting on behalf of the Alchemist Association. The Grand Exploration had been nothing more than a cover, a convenient excuse to eliminate Magna, whose capabilities the Association feared. As their story unfolded, the adventurers around them began to draw their weapons, their eyes turning to Weissman with growing fury. But Weissman only laughed maniacally, bitterly. He accused them of slandering the Association, calling them terrible for thinking the Association would resort to assassination. His laughter echoed across the camp, wild and unsettling. Then his tone shifted. The facade dropped. Now that the truth had been revealed, he declared that no one would be allowed to return to the surface. Using the forbidden art of biological alchemy, Weissman began to alter his form. His body twisted and reshaped, first sprouting leathery bat-like wings, then limbs transforming into feline-like paws. One grotesque change followed another. When the transformation was complete, he had evolved into a monstrous chimera. Gasps and cries of alarm rang out across the camp. The adventurers stood stunned by the grotesque and horrifying image before them. Still, Weissman, now the chimera, spoke again, spinning yet another lie. He claimed that the 38th Grand Exploration Party had been annihilated by monsters in the dragon's graveyard. With a battle cry, the adventurers launched their attack. The chimera leapt from its place, dodging with unnatural speed. With the swiftness of a tiger, it appeared behind the group of adventurers in the blink of an eye. Then, using the brute strength of a behemoth, it struck with a massive paw, sending several members of the party flying from the sheer force of the blow. Suddenly, multiple hydra-like heads from its tail started spewing thick, toxic smoke. The air became tainted, choking and poisoning those who remained standing. This was the power of blood alchemy, Weissman's forbidden art of rewriting the genetic blueprint itself. A return to the very origin of life's evolution, a recreation of the primordial sea. And now he intended to test it. Weissman turned to face Magna, his monstrous form towering the adventurers. He mocked the man, comparing blood alchemy to gold alchemy, asking which was closer to the work of the gods. Magna simply spun his gun, his expression unmoved. He replied with cold disinterest. Magna was ready to face Weissman's monstrous form. He leapt from the cliff and began shooting, but the beast quickly evaded his attacks. In a quick flash, it appeared behind Magna and delivered an explosive punch. Magna managed to dodge just in time and aimed at the monster's head, but it swiftly blocked the bullet with its arm. Weissman felt the power behind the shots and noticed the new form Magna's gun had taken. He wondered if Magna had somehow integrated parts of an ancient relic, knowing that their current technology couldn't match his own strength. Realizing the threat Magna posed, Weissman evolved once again, adding armor-like toughened skin to his body, and proceeded to attack. Percival quickly arrived at the scene, using his ace guard to effectively block Weissman's strike. Lilica then used her shadow stitch to immobilize the monster, signaling Magna to move. Utilizing his golden alchemy, Magna transformed his weapon once more, this time into a rocket launcher, and fired 2 missiles at the beast. Weissman exploded into pieces, bringing a moment of joy to the adventurers. However, Percival noticed that the creature wasn't finished yet. The scattered remains turned into bats, then reassembled into a complete body once again. Weissman was fully regenerated. He revealed that every cell in his body possessed a life of its own, allowing him to eventually reform, regardless of the type of attack used against him. He once again mocked the lad, claiming that Magna had revealed the limitations of his golden alchemy. But Magna countered the idea, asserting it was quite the opposite. He had realized that, even on a battlefield filled with materials tougher than Weissman's shell, he couldn't utilize them. Blood alchemy was merely the manipulation of cells. If that was the case, then there had to be a way to defeat him by ensuring those proteins and cells could no longer function. Magna once again altered the form of his weapon. This time, he transformed it into a flamethrower and engulfed the chimera in flames. Weissman roared in pain. The sisters understood instantly that if he were burned to charcoal, he wouldn't be able to regenerate. But suddenly the monster spoke. He explained that proteins mutate under heat, which is why living beings fear fire, but they were only right up to a point. Unlike dried wood, living organisms contain water in their bodies, preventing flames from burning deep enough to kill him. Magna mocked the beast's title of professor, thinking it ironic that, as a fellow alchemist, he didn't understand that such a minor flame wasn't meant to inflict real damage. He revealed that both the battle and the conversation about fire had merely been a smokescreen to distract and disrupt Weissman's awareness. It was then that Weissman noticed a brilliant light above him. Melt's spell, eschatology, descended from the sky. He screamed in hatred as he recognized the caster. Melt smiled maniacally as she unleashed her spell on the one who had once been her ally. Weissman was shocked to see his former student still alive, knowing that the wound he had inflicted should have been fatal. But what surprised him even more was the fact that Magna had saved someone who had once tried to kill him. He began questioning Melt, claiming that by saving Magna, she was betraying justice itself. She is the Crimson Calamity, the one who burned everything around her to death. As a child, she had been imprisoned, carrying nothing more than a simple desire to be free. But when Weissman found her, he twisted that desire. He made her believe that the countless deaths caused by her flames were entirely her fault, and that merely existing was a sin. He brainwashed her, convincing her that her destructive power could only be redeemed through justice. By serving the Alchemist Association in the name of justice, she could atone for her sins. If she refused, she would be cast back into darkness, locked away once more. He warned her that going against the association would leave her completely alone, that no one would need her, no one would want her. But Melt remembered her conversation with Magna before they arrived at the dragon's grave. In his calm but earnest tone, he had asked for her strength, telling her that when they faced Professor Weissman again, he would be counting on her to stand with him in battle. Magna understood that ordinary attacks wouldn't bring Weissman down. It would take an enormous amount of heat to defeat him. He wasn't fully aware of Melt's relationship with the Alchemist Association, but he knew enough to recognize that it was far from healthy. So he made a deal. If she agreed to help him, he promised not to report to the guild that she had once tried to assassinate him. She wondered if she was truly needed in that moment. Magna reassured that her power was essential. Weissman continued to guilt-trip Melt, trying to drag her back into submission, but she brushed it off, declaring that as long as Magna needed her, that was enough. With a hint of sarcasm, she even thanked Weissman for everything. The professor expressed his hatred once more. As he tried to raise his paw to counterattack, Lucia swiftly sliced off his right arm. At the same time, Liz aimed for his other paw, keeping him restrained. Magna, on the other hand, started shooting at the Hydra heads. Melt followed up by casting a devastating spell compressing 5 bursts of magical energy into one focused strike, laser shot. The beam tore through Weissman with such intensity that he vanished completely. Not even ashes remained. Her flame is a force capable of destroying the world. The members of the Black Lilies rushed toward Lilica, embracing her with joy. Even the companions of the Red Hound were relieved to see their leader return safely. Percival credited their victory to the unexpected help of Catpaw and the mage. The other members gathered around, curious about what had happened during their absence. Percival assured them he would explain everything back at the guild. And so, the 38th Grand Expedition came to an end, surpassing all previous records by reaching a depth of 4,160 meters into the dungeon. They had also uncovered the existence of an ancient civilization buried within. Out of the 225 participants who joined the expedition, 223 returned alive to the surface. The last surviving piece of Weissman had taken the form of a fly. He had barely escaped the final attack, and now, trapped in such a humiliating form, he swore he would never forgive them. Powerless, he planned to contact the other elf who could help restore his body, because he could no longer use alchemy with the brain of a fly. As he buzzed low on the floor, he suddenly came across a frog. Before he could react, the small creature snapped its tongue out and devoured him whole. Chapters end at 19. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you loved this manga. Have a good day.